Welcome back, everyone. So, next up, we have Demo, Derek, Emily, and Samantha with how to make game trailers to hook and excite your audience. So, I'm going to hand over to them now and yeah, enjoy.
Hey everyone, I'm Demo Kirill. I direct game trailers and cinematics, and I've been doing that professionally over the last 3 years. Started making fan trailers when I was about 13, 14, making cinematics off like my favorite mil sims like Armor Free and like Assassin's Creed games and whatnot. And my brand has been centered around boldness, typically lots of violence. I like action games and like VR specifically. And the reason I got into VR is because I do a lot of different sports. I've done MMA. Well, I've been doing MMA for the last 6, 7 years. I did free running for a bit, music, did some firearms training, and going into VR is very physical. And that gave me the perfect space to express all of that, because your body is an instrument in VR, your head's the camera, and your hands and the way you move is part of the narrative. So you're not just pressing buttons, you're performing. And the more authentic your movement is, the better the footage comes across. And I really wanted to pick up a lot of different skills. 'Cause I grew up on Jackie Chan and watching these films, and he did like everything. So that was a big inspiration for me. Talking about inspirations, these are some of the things I grew up on and I really loved. But my favorite film of all time is Dark Knight. The Raid there as well. We have Winter Soldier, the Dice team in their trailers, Assassin's Creed, the Transformers films are good ones. I like the first three quite a lot. And these have in terms of inspiration is normally the choreography, the emotion, and the pacing of these. And I go to these at different times of my planning stage. If I need to choreograph a very good action scene, I'll typically turn to the Raid or Winter Soldier. If I need to clean up my sound design, I'll be going to Battlefield or Transformers. If I need to get some narrative ideas or just really focusing on tension, Dark Knight is typically what I go to. I mean, there's many, many more, but um, these are what I dream about like all the time. So, what makes a cinematic VR trailer? Um, a lot of people know when something looks or feels cinematic quite intuitively. However, I think it's easy to think it's just about how something looks. Right? We have like Christopher Nolan films, which are very, very crystal clear, but we also have the other end, which is like handheld um, type films like Blair Witch, Cloverfield's another one, Hardcore Henry, and these don't have the same kind of clarity, but you can really get immersed in from the feeling of it. And I think universally, there is a couple of things that translate directly into VR, and it's probably more important. Number one would be composition. Your shots need a lot of clarity. You don't want your hands or your weapons cluttering the frame. You can use a lot of cinematic fury if you want, but typically it's quite intuitive. You want to use the rule of thirds, use space, treat the headset like a camera. You can take it off if you want. There's a lot of crazy things I've done to get some shots. I'll be like half upside down my chair so to look like I'm doing a backflip, or you can use your body to slide around and stuff, and really accentuate the body language and play to VR strengths. So you really want to make sure that your composition is at the center of everything you're doing because you have limitations, right? You're not, unless you're doing in-engine cinematics, you don't have control over like too much of the lighting. You can have some smart debug stuff, but typically things are pretty set and baked in. So you want to lean into shape, silhouette, motion, and really sell what feels good, not what looks perfect. In terms of your body language to make it feel more cinematic, in flat screen games you can fake it because animations there are normally amazing, but maybe you have to perform these things yourself, and your presence is really your edge. So making sure that these like subtle flinches, if bullets whizzing past you, raw reactions, really selling your body language is what's really going to help that. That's just in terms of capture. When you move into editing, like you really want to let the shots breathe and then punch, breathe again, punch again. Like have good pace in between them, arcs, hook, like music. And typically, I look at movie trailers for reference. It's funny because we're making game trailers, but game trailers before were a lot more functional. They felt a lot more like commercials compared to the kind of stuff we're having now. And I think we found a really nice balance of um, storytelling, cinematic storytelling, whilst also communicating with the themes of the game. So yeah, let the shots breathe, let the edit flow. Make sure your sound design hits really hard. Reference constantly. Look at movies, look at different games, and number one again, just make sure your composition is key at all times. Slide. Capturing cinematic VR without cringe. This one is really important because typically, if you just focus on the stuff not to do, you already be halfway there. Um, Run through a list of things. So number one for me would be overacting. So when you flail or exaggerate, this doesn't look immersive. It just looks a bit wacky and goofy. And I know with VR, like it's still quite early, so we're trying to figure out the best ways to communicate that motion. We want to move with purpose. Tension is felt in the silence too. So there's a big explosion or something going on. You don't need to flow your hands around the camera all the time. I call that blind man when in VR because you want to show it to VR. Your hands are always there in the composition. So you want to like don't center your hands to show it to VR. Frame for feeling or for proof, and make sure that you've really mastered the gameplay as well. So that's another thing that can come across quite quick. Poor gameplay. So in the top right there, that's for a game called Tactical Assault. It's one of my favorite VR games. So it's a really great mil sim. We brought in a military advisor to help with the performance because again, this is you. Like you have to make sure that when you're doing your weapon manipulation and clearing out buildings, things look authentic. So the motion should look smooth and intentional and very confident. And if you lean into those two things, typically just having good, solid performances, spending time with a game. If you're playing a guy with a sword, make sure you're moving like a guy with a sword. If you're playing a military operator, move like that. If you're playing someone that's just in the world and don't know what's going on, you can be a bit more frantic, but you want to take the role of the actor and really settle into what you have. And sometimes another thing we do is we can bring people out of the experience. You want to show that they're playing VR, so you bring the camera out and you show their reaction. Wow, like can you imagine watching a God of War trailer? And you kill an enemy and then it zooms out and you have the guy holding the PS4 or PS5 controller saying like, wow, like you don't need to do that. People knows VR. We've did this for a while. Communicate through the gameplay. Let the world sell itself, and trust the viewer's intelligence. So shape the chaos, right? VR is very messy. Have glitches, bugs, height differences. IK can freak out. It can be very annoying, but also a gift at the same time. You don't need to try to control everything. Try to shape it. Um, trust if you're filming something for multiplayer. Trust the actors. Let them get their personality involved. People move differently. People think differently. Wacky stuff can happen. People can trip over in real life, and it can end up looking cool. You can like do that again. Some of your best shots will come from accidents, happy accidents. I think anyone that does any kind of capture understands what it is, and you can plan your choreography. And I think typically you want to when you're going through that pre-production phase, but just be open to letting things happen dynamically and keep the space open to improvise and adapt. And the chaos makes it feel real. You need to have the eye to turn that noise into some sort of rhythm there. And my last point would be when the realist talk is just save trailers down arrival, like the same pacing, same cuts, same generic music. If you're making a trailer for an action game, lean into the action. If it's very brutal, I've been criticized so much on my YouTube videos for being over violent, but that's I'm playing Blade and Sorcery. You could do some crazy stuff in there. Lean into it, have your identity, be joyful. Let the personality be distinct. And if you're putting all this work into your voice, you have to make sure it goes out there and it has something to say. Or why would anyone care? So in your marketing, make sure that things feel consistent. Right? If you're going to make a trailer for, I've got Hell Sweeper on the left there. It's like a Doom S Devil May Cry. I'm not going to use rap music, right? If I'm making something for like a sports game, maybe so, but go with what makes sense for the world you're trying to build. And my closing thoughts would, you don't need to be flashy, you just need to be intentional, to really have that cinematic feel. Like one moment of truth, like a shot with clarity and feeling, hits harder than 100 fast cuts that don't really say a lot. So when you're directing or capturing, ask yourself, does this feel honest to the game? What am I trying to communicate? How would the player want to experience this? Who is meant to be in the world right now, and how can I capture that? Does the composition look right? A tool I'd recommend is using Live. You've got a viewfinder there so you can see the composition itself, and you've got like FOV sliders and You can position the camera and make it very smooth, and that will really help with the capture there. And yeah, that'll help you cut through the noise. And hopefully that gives you some tips as to how to orchestrate your trailer to feel a lot more cinematic if you're in VR. But if you need some help, please hit me up. Demo Crew on YouTube and my Discord and Twitter and all sorts. So yeah, that's me.
All right. Hi, I'm Derek Liu. I've been making game trailers for 8, 10 something years. I've been editor for like 20 years. And here are some of the things that I've worked on over the years. Worked on lots of really amazing games. I started in movie trailers as an assistant editor, and growing up, I always loved movie trailers. So I really think of myself more as an editor than, say, a director. And that's the background that I have. And I'm always saying that gameplay is story. I always get a little bit irritated when there's just a story trailer for a AAA game that's just, just all the cutscenes, because I feel like having gameplay informs the story. Because if The Last of Us was a match 3 game, then it'd be a very different experience than if it's a cinematic third-person action game. So I think it's really important to have gameplay in pretty much all the trailers, as long as it's in some capacity to be shown. And I wrote this authentic look, cinematic flavor, because I think, unlike demo, I don't feel super good at making like cinematic shots. And so what I tried to do is take just the gameplay, and it's still all the game camera in there. I don't tend to modify the camera a lot for my trailers. So really, when you're looking at it, it could just work really well as just B-roll for what the game looks like. But hopefully through the editing and the storytelling, that it has a cinematic flavor to it, like a movie trailer, but still also helps you understand what the gameplay is like. And really, I'm just here to just enhance what's already there. I try to make trailers that feel like the game is just presenting itself, which of course it's not as soon as you start editing or capturing in a certain way. But if there's very little, I use very few title cards, I use voiceover sparingly. So I just never want the trailer to feel like sort of a back of the box bullet point list that's really doing a really hard sell for what the game is. And hopefully when people watch the trailer, they just think, man, that game looks cool. I mean, of course, it'd be great to say the trailer feels really great, really well edited, but I don't care as much about that as if they just see like, hey, that looks like a cool game, or I've played that game. That's exactly what the game feels like when I play it. And yeah, I'm just here to wrap it up all nice and pretty with good music, good sound design, tight editing, dialogue, and story that makes sense and shows the game off in its best light. And that's it for me.
Hello, I'm Emily Colm, and I've been a trailer specialist for about 13 years, and I'm from Nova Scotia. I started out as a developer, then producer, and quickly shifted to marketing, working for GOG in Warsaw. But my experience falls into 2 categories, beginning with a couple agencies in Quebec that specialize in cinematic style gameplay trailers for titles like For Honor, Dead by Daylight, and Watch Dogs 2. After that, I worked at an indie-focused PR agency, Evolve PR, where I made trailers in a variety of different genres with a broad spectrum and budget. So this taught me creative problem solving, and is also where I got to direct some of my biggest multiplayer capture sessions to date, with 15 to 20 actors on a regular basis. I also got to take on more of a mentorship role, working closely with developers to realize a final product from their vision. My approach to making a trailer is using the application of artistic techniques to communicate a message to an engaged, entertained audience. In the concept phase, I'm considering theory as well as application, such as aesthetics and consumer behavior. At the core of my process, there are these 3 guidelines. I need to make sure that what we are building makes sense as a player. This includes things like in-game integrity, player experience. I need to make sure it's appealing as a viewer with visual storytelling, composition, musicality, and ultimately generates interest, which is the messaging, structure, and pacing, rhythm, things like that. Lastly, I have a certain passion for education and direction. So in addition to production services, I really enjoy consulting and collaborating with teams directly to level up their video content. And that's it for me.
Samantha, you're muted.
Thank you, Derek, for saying me. Hello, I'm Samantha Greer. I'm a trailer editor. I've only been editing trailers for around 2 years. But I've been editing video for 8 or so years at places like the BBC, partly when I worked in games media, which is where I worked before this. And in my own time outside of trailer editing, I'm also a comic artist and writer. So I feel like I come to trailers with quite a storytelling mindset. That's what I feel strongest about. And mostly I work with a lot of independent games. These are just a small sampling of what I've worked with over the last couple of years. It's a wide variety of genres. And while I think games being as diverse as they are, and the language from one game to the other requiring very different problem solving, I think I generally have settled on a sort of general philosophy for how I approach trailers these days, and how I like to think about them and discuss them with clients. But I started with AMVs back in the day with Windows Movie Maker. There was this video, Resident Evil 4, set to Die Another Day, Madonna's Die Another Day. And it like rewired my brain. I was like, oh, wow, you can do this, you can edit. Like, this is what editing is. Because I'd never seen editing outside of movies or TVs, where it's almost invisible for the most part. I think I'd never seen anything where it's like I was familiar with the source material, so I could see the way that it had been cut and excerpted. And then, put it to music, and there's, that was like, neurons firing that really like, completely rewired my brain. And I think it's not exactly how I approach making trailers, but I think somewhere in the back of my brain when I approach things, I do think about like, wow, sometimes just you watch something and it's set to music and it's so exciting. And you don't think about it on any deeper level. It's just all there emotionally. And I think that's a lot of how I like to think about trailers. Because I think for me, trailers are about a big emotional hook. I think often when I'm talking to clients, a lot of the trap that I find people fall into with trailers are treating trailers as exposition or information. It's a way to get across bullet points and back of the box stuff. And I think this to me is what you want to avoid, because I don't think that's what people connect with. I think, people want a reason to care. First and foremost, they want to watch your game and be emotionally drawn in, where they care enough to go on and learn the things your game is doing. And so I think when it comes to trailers, I'm always talking to clients, we want a big emotional hook. We want something that people can immediately connect with without thinking, they're just feeling. And that doesn't have to be narrative. In a very explicit sense, it's easy to think of a big emotional hook being connected to stuff that is, there's an explicit story, with cutscenes and acting and stuff. But, all of the different kind of emotional hooks are valid, whether that be fun or horror or anything in between. It's all valid to pull people into your trailers just with something that's so, easy to grasp. You don't want to get hung up trying to explain your game to them. You just want to present them with something that without thinking, they can feel it, they understand sort of implicitly what your game is about. And you want to foreground that. You want to make that as strong as possible, as that emotional feeling. And I think what I'm often trying to capture when I'm recording for the game to edit into the trailer is just to find the footage and the gameplay that is most expressive of what I think this is what the game does and this is what it does well. And it's just so transparent to anyone watching it, because you're trying to connect with people who they really resonate with, so you don't want to hide what the game is. You want to be very upfront with it. And I think tied into that is this idea of giving the viewer this idea of like a tangible promise of like what that all entails. You don't have to explain what the game is from beginning to end. You don't have to give away a lot, but I do think you have to give them enough for their imagination to run wild about what the game is going to do and what they're going to be doing while they're playing it. So, whether that, in the case of something like The Witcher, you're thinking about this RPG where you have to make difficult choices, or even if it's something that's like more lighthearted, like a Mario Kart or something, and you're thinking about how you're going to spend the time with friends in that game. Whatever the experience is, that's the thing that you want to focus on. You don't need to give people this tangible sense of like, this is how it plays. These are the controls. These are the features. I think a lot of what you're trying to do is to give them the feeling of what it feels like to play. And that's the thing that I think will live on when they've stopped watching the trailer. You want to plant an idea of the game in their head. So when the trailer's done, they're still thinking about it. They're still imagining what that game's going to be like. And that's how I think, it stays with them and, they get excited, come time when the game's actually coming out. And I think the last thing, tied into all that is, I feel like this is my, like, one of my points that I'm always beating is just like, don't sweat the details. I don't find lots of UI or explanation or tutorialization very interesting. I think that's true generally. I don't think many people like to be sat there and told how to play a game. You want to discover what a game is like to play for yourself, and you want that to feel organic and natural. So when I'm making trailers, I'm often trying to avoid a sense of we are feeding you the features. We are telling you and explaining the game to you, and we're telling you how to play it and what you have to do. I want to avoid that kind of explicit stuff and more land on the implicit feeling. You want people to care enough to ever get around to learning how to play the game. So, don't feed all this UI or explanation, or all this, all the rundown of like all the specific features and how you play it, but do give a sense of what it feels like to play and what's enjoyable about that experience, what's compelling about it, and because that can still be honest and authentic. People can still come away with a really strong sense of what the game's going to be like without getting bored and bogged down in all the details. So, you just want to give them a reason to care, that by the time they come around to the game, they're already on board and they're there to, to learn everything. And that's my philosophy on trailers.
Awesome. So, should we open it up to some of the questions that have been asked?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Okay, so got a few here already. So we'll start with this one. What should be included in the first 5 seconds of a trailer to hook the viewer?
I was going to say not your game studio logo or publisher logo. If you can avoid that, you're a step ahead, I feel like.
You're head and shoulders above.
Yeah.
If you don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll sound obvious, but the thing that is the hook of your game is what you should use to hook people in the first 5 seconds. I think that people worry, they think about like that trailer before the trailer that comes before movie trailers, like, oh, well, I got to do that. It's like, you don't have to do that. You just, I think if you can communicate the feeling of your game and the genre, that's a great place to be in. Assuming your game is like very gameplay front. Like if your game is very like story focused, then if you can get the story hook or the premise in the front of the trailer, that's a really good place to be. Like Firewatch, it's not really about like the nitty gritty gameplay. It's about the setting and the premise and the characters. So because how many other games can you think about that are about a fire lookout? So that's a good way for that game to hook. And then other games have a different way. But I think about feeling, genre, and like story premise is what I think.
To add to Derek's, I would say that first 5 seconds is whatever how I like to do it is my first 5 seconds, it's the most engaging, coolest tease of what is going to come in the trailer. And then sort of the second to last, just the second best towards the end to rehook, to re-up that engagement towards the end. But I would also say what should happen in the first 5 seconds is something that generates interest, that supports the message that comes next. Because if you're already placing in the viewer a little something that's going to make a connection soon after they continue in the trailer, something that's familiar, something that they recognize, it's a really good way to go about it, in my experience.
Typically, with the way I structure my edits as well, like I normally don't focus on the first 5 seconds till after I finish the trailer. So normally after I finish the trailer, I would then go through and look at the best parts of that trailer, and I'll cut it up into a really short montage and then put that all at the beginning. It depends on the genre. For narrative games, you might want to start with some kind of dialogue or like a really beautiful shot of the landscape or something that's hook people in. But I've worked on a lot of action games, and that's normally my go-to. It's like I have an idea what I have there. I'll wait. I'll look at the most interesting parts of the trailer. I'll put it together to hook people in straight away, and then kind of reset from there and rebuild to that climax again.
Yeah, I think it's something that you've said many times before, Derek, that I've internalized is just as quickly as possible. I just kind of want to let people know what game they're playing, what kind of game this is, and what the answer to that question varies from genre to genre. But yeah, generally from 5 seconds in, if this is a horror game, I want people to get that, unless you're being deliberately subversive, and again, if that's the quality of your game, you want it up front. But, whatever your game's doing, you don't want any confusion, and you want people to know immediately, because if you're trying to seek out horror game fans or, action game fans or whatever the genre is, and they have to wait 30 seconds into your trailer to find out that's what your game is, you've quite likely already lost them before they get there. So yeah, you just want to be upfront in some way, make sure that you're kind of upfront about what the game is. I tend to hold back a little something for the end. I don't try to put like always my best foot forward. I try to put something really exciting up front and then make sure there's something even better later in, hopefully. But yeah, just make sure there's no confusion. People know exactly what the game is to some degree as soon as it starts.
Yeah, and also real quick, depending on your genre and your tone, the feel of the edit will be different. Like the opening of the Spiritfarer launch trailer is animals sleeping, and it's perfect. But that's what works for that game would not work for another game necessarily. So really just look at your game and think about what shows my game as it is.
Cool. All right, let's see, what else do we have? Got this one from Hack and Stack on YouTube. At which point in production should you release the trailer? Is it okay to put a trailer placeholder in your Steam page while waiting to have more quality gameplay / beauty shots?
Oh wow,
That's a good question. I personally think, at least because I have my YouTube channel there as well, and I upload my stuff there, I wouldn't put a placeholder video there that's not of the quality where it should be, because that the first impression is everything. If people see that trailer, they might not come back to your Steam page for a second time again. So maybe warm up with some screenshots, some like bios of what the game's about, and then make sure your first foot forward is a strong one.
I mean, I think if you want like a really like minimum to put up your trailer, then your art should look basically like your game is going to look. And I think you should have enough variety to make the game look decently substantial. So maybe like you want to have 3 environments or 4 environments, like different color palettes in there. And if you can communicate what the hook is through that first trailer, then that's fine. I mean, personally, I think that like if you're first time developer or like you don't have a lot of attention, I don't think it actually matters that much, because if it's placeholder, because there aren't that many people watching when you're just getting started. Like if you're well-established developer, then it makes sense to just absolutely wait until it's like everything is like perfectly polished and everything like that. But if you're just again, you have no following, it's not super dangerous. Just like swap it out later, because there's so many people on Steam that when you update it later, you know, you're not gonna like burn. The whole audience on Steam is not going to see your trailer if you put out your placeholder. You know, a very small subset of it is going to see it, and then if you update it later, I think that's fine. But that's what I think.
See, if my personal opinion would be no placeholder, but there is nothing wrong with sort of rebranding that placeholder as something a little different. Like if it's if it's too early in your production to be showing off, like your visuals aren't locked, for example, people really respond well to behind the scenes and dev diary type content. So I would rebrand that placeholder trailer as like a teaser of a work in progress. Does that make sense to the others who are like in the panel?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I think that's probably what I would, something like that was probably what I would mention is, because I think the way that for smaller games, the way that I am often discovering them is through repeated, like, GIFs and small clips that are shared repeatedly over months, if not years. Yeah. And by the time a trailer drops, you know, it's quite a ways in production, and it's almost like a re-unveiling. It's like, all these little snippets you've been seeing, this is what it's all for. But as you know, as to the specific moment when you should release your trailer in development or production, I don't know. I've worked in all kinds of stages and got all kinds of results out of it. I've definitely worked with games that it's too early. I've worked with games where I'm surprised that they've waited so long to have a trailer. And then, but equally, I've worked with stuff where it's like very early in production, and the trailer that we ended up putting out ends up pretty representative of the final game and looks really good, you know, even though we're still years from that being out. So yeah, it's really hard to say, but I think just, you know, to what everyone else is saying, I think it's just, you want to make sure that whatever you're putting out is just, this is indicative of what I want the final game to be like, or what it's going to be like, that you're setting the right expectations and you're giving the right impression. So at whatever point that happens to be true in your game's development, I think that's the time to maybe think about releasing a trailer.
You have to think of it as a whole campaign as well, right? Like the trailer itself is not going to do all the marketing for you. So to that guy's point about doing devlogs, uploading it as a YouTube short, doing it on Twitter, the Discord community, and then being consistent, you can really drop your trailer at any time. You'll see a huge array of different results. Some people might not do anything, and their first trailer just blows up. But I don't think it's good to expect that. I think the safest bet is some kind of announcement, like, you know, early in your production, then you're building people on, bringing them along the journey behind the scenes, and then when things are further along, like Samantha said, do like a re-unveil, and then you have like a release date or maybe some more trailer or whatnot. So I think just being consistent with little bits in between that, and the when isn't too important. You'll kind of know as you're going along as well, depending on how your audience is responding to your gifts and whatnot.
Cool. All right. So next up, from Jared over on LinkedIn. Do you have any specific recommendations for trailers in the free-to-play space, particularly for PC and or VR?
In terms of specific,
I'm assuming they mean trailers for free-to-play games that we would hold up as an example of like, oh, this is a good trailer for a free-to-play game.
I think
That's
that's
what
really,
I'm saying.
I think it's a really hard question to ask because there's so many different types of free-to-play games. I think the other thing, the only thing I could think of is that with free-to-play, the like sort of sales funnel for that is structured differently because normally like we're working on games where it's like, hey, pay $20 to do this, whereas free-to-play, the barrier to entry is much lower because they can just download it right away. So that's why you see a lot of like shady tactics for mobile games where you think the game is this thing, but actually it's this thing. It's like, haha, we got you to download it, which I don't agree with at all. I think it's completely unethical. But I still would recommend same sort of things we've been talking about is like show what the game is clearly, and maybe you could front load that it's free because people often don't get to the end of the trailer, but I don't feel like it needs to be like super different as far as like structure or storytelling. People might have disagreements.
I think the only thing that comes to mind for me, specifically I don't play a lot of free-to-play games, but one of the main ones that I do is Warframe. And I think one thing that does occur to me that's a little different from general trailer output is, every so often they've got updates, they're adding new missions or whatever, new story content, a somewhat regular interval. And I think the challenge there is to make sure that each of those stands out. And the trailers tend to be a good way to do that because through editing and music choices, etc., you can communicate that, oh, this, it's not just more of the same. It's like we are attempting to do something different with this. And it's an attempt to, bring in people that maybe were not interested in the game for however many years prior. And sometimes they go bigger and, on that, I think when they did Warframe 1999, they made a really big effort to make that a big new starting point for bringing people in. And some of that was done through the trailers, the music choices. It had a very different tone and style from what they'd done previously. So I think that's the only thing that comes to mind is, if you've got a long ongoing free-to-play game, is sometimes trailers can be this opportunity to reintroduce your game to an audience that maybe has written it off thus far.
Yeah, but in terms of the actual structure and like how it plays out, I don't think anything changes there. The rules are pretty universal as to what makes a great trailer. The only thing that should change is the tone, depending on the genre. But maybe you might be releasing some more trailers. So to Samantha's point, like each one should stand out in some kind of way. But either way, like a great trailer is a great trailer. It doesn't matter if it's free to play or not.
Yeah, I would say, echoing what everybody else said, those are great answers. So I'm like, what am I going to add here? That in-game integrity is super important with free-to-play games. I think that there can be some going into watching these trailers with wondering what's missing. Like Derek was talking about some of the not super fun tactics that some of the marketing campaigns do. So I think in that is having, what would be important to me is having all the accurate information up front and very, very clear about, being honest with your audience, I suppose is my point. Yeah.
Yeah, this will sound quite niche, but sometimes you can watch a trailer and tell it's a free-to-play game straight away because it can feel a lot like a commercial trying to steal money from you, and it just does not look like the native of the game at all. So just try not to make those kind of trailers. Just focus on making something that's organic and authentic to what your game actually is.
Nice. All right, so this one from Cynic over on YouTube. If doing a Kickstarter, what cadence of trailer releases is best up until the Kickstarter launch date?
Now, would that be cadence as in the frequency of drops, or
I would imagine so, yeah. Or at least that's the impression I get from the question.
Yeah. Again, I think. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, it's okay. I feel that in terms of frequency, the more consistent you are, the better. Then your audience is going to sort of get used to your patterns and your rhythm and be coming back to your page again and again and again. So consistent and regular updates would be very important leading up to your Kickstarter. And again, people like especially Kickstarter audience, I find they want to see process and they want to see everything. They want to see as much as you're willing to show them. So, yeah, that would be my point of view.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I don't.
Sorry.
No, it's just to challenge the framing of like, okay, it's a Kickstarter, so the release schedule has to be different. But you just made a point I didn't think about that. You know, they've already invested money into it, so they have more. They're gonna want to see the progress more than, you know, if they're just wish list on Steam. But
yeah, they have certain expectations because they put
yeah,
their money into it, right? Yeah.
for sure. But in terms of like the release schedule, I don't think like, okay, let's say typically you have the announced trailer, and then you might have like a gameplay trailer, and then maybe an overview and then launch trailer. That's really up to you. Just make sure that you're updating them in between with some kind of behind the scenes. Here's what we did this month. Just show that the game's progressing along, and you haven't just disappeared.
If that question is saying like do trailers before the Kickstarter launches, I think the Kickstarter launch is the announcement, because I'm trying to imagine like trailer. By the way, back it on Kickstarter. That I would defer to like a marketing PR strategy expert on this, but I feel like the Kickstarter launch is the announcement of the game, and then yeah, everything that Emily and Demo said about updates, that all still applies.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think I just agree with echo what everyone else has said.
No, that's fair enough. Hope that's answered your question there, Cynic. Let's see which one to bring up next. Let's go with Josh over on LinkedIn. What are some ways to spice up visual interest for a 2D game, particularly a platformer?
I would say don't like go crazy on your motion graphics and your editing transitions and stuff, because I think I see that a lot where it feels like this trailer is very insecure about its own game. Like, oh, I gotta use star wipe, gotta use whatever transition, gotta put in everything that I see in this effects palette in order to make it look interesting. And then just turns out it's just not reflective of the game itself. So I think you just have to just own what you have, is what I think. You can, I mean, if you have really good music that could really bring up the energy, if your game has certain like personality, whether it's like comedic or a lot of attitude, maybe you could add a voice actor, as long as it's in keeping with what the game is. But I wouldn't do it to the detriment of the authenticity of how you're representing the game. Is my general philosophy on that.
Excuse me. For me, when working with 2D games, I think what's really important is visual diversity. So especially since a lot of 2D games, you don't really have a lot of diversity with what you can do with the camera. It's like stationary, your guy's in the middle, and that's that. So applying as many differences in the visual plane, as it were, is the most important. So that would be differences in color, differences in speed, capturing some of your gameplay in slow motion so that you can ramp up your action points, things like that. You want to break up your visual field with some close-ups versus back further away, and you can do that by recording your game in 4K and just zooming in on some elements or popping in some elements. So you really want to create a lot of differences in your edit, so that we're not getting used to seeing the same thing, or even if it's different actions and different gameplay, if everything is sort of the same color or the same position, it's going to be repetitive and you're going to lose viewership. So as many differences and visual diversity that you can apply to your trailer for games like that is really, really important.
Yeah, I think I've worked on a lot of 2D like sort of platformer type games, whether they're literally 2D or they're just like the 2D on side scroll perspective. And they're a really diverse bunch of trailers, like just because those games are, besides this like framing, they're quite diverse from each other. And some of those trailers, because they're 2D like visuals and they're quite minimalist, I've been able to do some fun editing tricks. Like there was a trailer for Tricky Castle that I did, and we set it to some music, and we could move the level around on the screen in the edit because it's just it's a one color background, one tone background, so you can move it around and you can do these fun swipes and stuff. And that works for that game because that game is very playful and very meta about you have to think outside of the box and stuff. So that felt like a real that felt like a match, where otherwise stuff like that, like I think Derek was saying, can be kind of distracting. The editing can sort of, you're over editing, and it can feel like, it's almost like you're trying to compensate for the game. It can end up feeling like. So it really varies. And ultimately, if if you've got a really good game, you just kind of want to be true to what that is. But yeah, there's definitely, for certain games, there's definitely some tricks you can get away with 2D stuff that you can play around with transitions and stuff that can be kind of subtle and things that you can't really do when you're making 3D games, or you can't do them in the same way at all. So yeah, there's definitely some things you can do, but generally it's, when it feels right, and for the most part, you just want to be authentic to the game.
Yeah, I haven't made a 2D like a trailer for a 2D platform game before, but there's things I really love about a great one, and I think the limitations is that VR is probably the medium where you can hide a bad game the most, just because just through your movement and gameplay, you can hide a lot of things, and then it'll go into traditional game making after that. But in 2D, like you're really limited in terms of like the camera movement and the animation. So you have to have a great game, and then from there, when I'm watching something and it's very readable and the gameplay looks very fluid between them, so like just clean match cuts, not too much going on. Sometimes with most 2D games I've seen, there's lots of VFX, lots of special effects going on. So just make sure that the action is readable, stuff that I really like when I'm watching those. But yeah, the game will speak for itself a lot there.
Yeah, and just I would say never sacrifice clarity for like pizzazz. Like,
yeah,
if it's not clear, then they're not going to get anything at all.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow, Meta Players just said demo's answering my question now without me having brought it up on screen. I presume you're referring to the question, do you think you could do a trailer for a cozy game or a match 3 type game demo?
A cozy game? What was that mean?
Where you do some nice gardening or something?
Oh yeah.
Just something chill rather than...
Yeah, for sure. Like when I was working at Live, we made trailers for like some assemblies required. It was like building robots, and we've done like Racket Club. So that's like a sports game, tennis game. But I'll be honest, I just love hitting things and shooting things, preferably. So like, it'd be awesome.
That's probably fair, I feel.
I'll probably reference that to someone else, but yeah, I've done some chill stuff too.
Fair enough. All right, let's see. Got one from Twitch. Pepster asks, what would you recommend to someone who wants to break into the field of trailer production?
That's a great question.
Have a friend called Gary Kings who's quite established and can help you. And he also knows Derek, and Derek can chat to you and help you out. That's what I would recommend.
I mean, start making fan trailers. That's where a lot of us started. Like, if it also depends on which like part of the industry you're trying to work in. If you want to work in AAA, I'm sorry, you have to get on LinkedIn, because that's where AAA game trailer marketing folks hang out. Follow lots of marketing people, brand managers, game titles with that sort of thing, and then the job postings come up every now and then, but you have to just wait because they're not always there. But yeah, make fan trailers. If you want to get in indie games, the thing I recommend usually is find a game you really like on Steam that has a demo but it's not out yet. Download the demo, make a fan trailer based off what's in that demo, which helps keep the scope down for what the trailer could be, because it's harder if you have like a 10-hour game versus like a 1-hour demo or something like that. And make a trailer for that. You could email it to the developers, you could tag them on social media, and then just expect nothing. Like, don't go and be like, hey, I made this. Do you want to buy this trailer off me? Just do it for the fun of it. Get what you need out of it, which is the experience of making a trailer. Tag it, show appreciation, say, hey, I loved your game. I made this fan trailer. and just move on to the next thing, and just try to make friends, because it's a small industry. And it's surprisingly hard for a lot of people, I think, to find trailer editors, even though we're out there and I know a lot of them. But trailer editors aren't always good at marketing themselves. So if the more people that know that you're doing this thing or that you want to do this thing, the better. So then that when that moment comes by, it's like, oh, this person needs a trailer, or maybe this person needs a trailer, the budget's really low. So maybe if you're early on, you don't mind taking like a lower budget trailer until the next one, then you should double your rate. Anyway, but just start making fan trailers, put it out there, put in your profile and your social media, like game trailer editor, and get off to the races.
Yeah, I would say also work on your style and your vibe, and have that come through in your edits. When your style is speaking through your edits, like that's what's going to make you stand out in a hiring process. Because in situations where I've had to hire juniors, that has been the defining factor for me. Like I really don't I want to see stuff that's been made. I want to see like trailers. I want to see work. But more than anything, I want to see intention and like expression and style, and because that is what really sets apart a trailer from a banger. You know what I mean? So that would be my angle.
So as well, use just study a lot. Like I really look up to the DICE team and like the trailers they do. So normally when I'm making a trailer, I'm always watching like Battlefield trailers, or I'm going to like the Assassin's Creed stuff. There's so many people out there better than what I do, especially like movie, like in the movie industry as well. So I'm always studying, figuring out, okay, why are people commenting? Okay, why does this trailer not have any comments that this trailer is great, but why does this one have? Like, what's making people attached to this or want to comment on it or rewatch it again? And sometimes you can like recreate those moments in your own way and just like just refine, just keep refining the stuff that you're watching and apply it to your own style over time. So that's in terms of like the skill building side of it. That's something I do a lot. I use a lot of reference, especially in the pre-production phase. Like during a previs, like I'll take stuff from like other trailers and I'll line it out. I'll be like, cool, like, this is a cool shot I can try and recreate it. And,
Yeah, I think to echo what you were saying and what everyone else has been saying is like, I think you've got to love editing enough that you're learning about editing in your own time, and you're learning editing of from anything, from music videos to film. You're really sort of immersing yourself in learning that language and making sure that when you're putting together stuff that you're doing for fun and you're putting together that, I think as Emily said, it ends up expressive, and people can see a lot of expertise and intention in there. I think that's the thing that it just screams confidence. And I guess, if you're putting together, a sort of portfolio and you're editing things for fun, I guess the only other thing I could add is just try and diversify what you're doing so that you show that maybe you can do a lot of different things. Because that's often how I get work, is people come to me going, oh, you've edited a game that's like our game. And the more games that you've edited like other people's games, the more chance that someone's going to recognize, oh, you could do the trailer for my game. So I think just make sure that you can maybe do a bunch of different things, and you can show that. And I think there's a good chance someone will come to you looking for work.
I was gonna say, pro tip to make your editing life a lot easier: just make sure you develop a really good ear for music. Because if you come across that one song, the trailer's done at that point.
Yeah, not wrong.
It's a cheat sheet.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna also add is definitely get used to getting feedback. Lots and lots of feedback, and start getting comfortable with receiving it and not taking it personally. It's a highly iterative process. You feedback on everybody's stuff. Everybody feeds back on your stuff. It's very important to get feedback. You're constantly making it better and better. So just learning how to take that as just as much part of the process as anything else is really important.
Also learn how to organize your footage really well. So then when you get that note and they say, hey, can you do this? But it would look better if XYZ, and you can just go, oh yeah, I got a shot like that over here. as opposed to
Yeah.
oh god.
Oh, now I'm gonna have to try and find footage for that. And
I've captured
yeah.
20 hours of whatever.
Awesome. Right. Next, let's go with this one from Trey over on YouTube. How has the short video trend changed the way you edit trailers? Do you still see value in longer cuts, or is the 1 minute format the way to go?
Yeah, that's similar to what I was saying before. That typically I start mine with hooks. It might be again because like I grew up in a YouTube background, but like sorry, not with hooks, with montages, just because it's very fast paced and people will be like, whoa, okay, and then you kind of settle down and go back into it. So that'll be the main change I've seen. And to be honest, when most trailers are going to be around a minute to a minute and a half, you really want to nail your pacing and have good music editing between that. But you don't want dead space. Every shot should have an intention. It shouldn't be there for no reason. There's the amount of shots that like I'm looking at the end of my time, I'm like, this is so pretty, but I don't know why you deserve to be here right now. You have to have intention by everything you're doing, and then when you can consolidate that, that will come over time as to how to pace it best. But that's what's changed about my editing personally. Typically, I start with like really strong hooks, and I have to make sure that each shot has to be there for like a really good reason, not just flash.
For me, this one is like, I'm a firm believer that like 90 seconds is how long a trailer should be in general, but there are exceptions to the rule. I have trailers in my portfolio that are 2 minutes long because they're, the main mechanic is conversation and dialogue. So it needs longer to show the elements of gameplay that we need to show. The way that short form content, especially like TikTok and Reels and things like that, has changed, though, is that if a client comes to me with the intention to perhaps repurpose the trailer for shorter form content, like in socials, that maybe I'm building it with the idea in mind that these sort of chunks of the trailer can more easily be repurposed for that reason. So instead of maybe one overarching story for the trailer, we've got one, and then we've got another one, and then we've got another one, so that each little section is you can sort of pluck it out and use it as you like. So but I would say, like, if you, like, I would rather have a 30-second trailer that like slapped hard than like Demo was saying, like a longer one that had drops in engagement or slow pacing, things like that.
Yeah, I think more than just the shorts and TikToks, just having a trailer that's longer than 60 to 90 seconds, you're just fighting against people hovering over that play button when they see the runtime. If like, most game trailers are 60 to 90 seconds, this one says 3 minutes, thumbnail doesn't look that good. But if it's that expected amount of time, then I think they're more likely to click on that. But it's the thing that affected me more than like TikTok or YouTube Shorts is just Chris Zukowski's study about how people watch Steam trailers on their store pages, which is that a lot of people just click through the progress bar because of like the studio logos or the shots in the beginning that don't really have gameplay. So for the Steam page trailer specifically, then I'll try to start with gameplay as soon as possible. But of course, captive audiences watching live events like Summer Game Fest, those still exist. So those trailers can be more sort of indulgent with the intro or the length, depending on how much time you're given. So I don't think it's affected me like a ton, because a trailer is still a trailer. When a game developer is going to send their game to press, they're probably still going to send their trailer, not like a TikTok, because just the format looks nicer. And a trailer does things differently than like a TikTok or a short.
Okay, right. That's all we've got time for today, I'm afraid. You can, of course, continue to ask questions in our Discord. The link should be in the chat right now. Up next, we have Paulina with how to get content creators to play and promote your game. So stay tuned.
Here we go.